Andrea. So good morning. My name is Andrea Hampton. Thank you for taking the time to attend Export Violations Top 3 Overlooked Activities. We will hear from Deanna Clark this morning. Before we jump into the presentation, I would like to let my colleague Tony Pooh from the U.S. Commercial Service in Philadelphia introduce himself.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea, and for organizing another fantastic webinar series. And good morning, everyone. So I'll be brief so we can get to our featured speaker today. So my name is Tony Pooh. I'm with the Commercial Service, which is the export promotion arm of the Department of Commerce. And I'm based at our Philadelphia office. So we cover the eastern half of Pennsylvania and all of Delaware. And so, as I mentioned, we're our mission, it's exclusively export. So that's to drive economic growth and to create jobs in the US. And how we do that is to help you grow your international sales. We have a team of specialists based at the US embassies and consulates across the globe. So that's around nearly 80 countries, and then plus Department of State support as well. So those specialists are well connected with the key players for the industries that they cover. In terms of working with us, whether you're new to export, you're a seasoned exporter, you're selling in multiple markets, we're able to assist you alongside Andrea at the Lehigh SBDC and their network of SBDCs in the state. How we can help ranges from, the services range from, counseling on your export strategy, gearing you with that market research and market intelligence. I will send over a couple links after this so you can check out some of the market intel that we have. We also can help with business matchmaking. That can be a customized service. It can take the form of like a trade mission. Oftentimes there are trade leads that comes from the embassies. Our programs at trade shows, which if you're attending, you should exhibiting at the show, you should definitely let us know so we can help you connect with those programs. And then other in-country support, like understanding your market potential, due diligence checks, helping you market an event. So, and then one more thing I wanted to mention is our commercial diplomacy. If you're bidding on foreign government tenders, we work closely with you to advocate on your behalf with the foreign government. So it's an intergovernmental effort to help U.S. companies win. So really a main takeaway, just if you are exporting, I would just get acquainted with us. And if I'm not your point of contact, whether someone else in my office or another office, happy to make the connection. So if an urgent issue does or a challenge or opportunity arises, we're able to get you connected quickly. And so I'll pop that information into the chat, my contact information. And that's about it. So thank you again, everyone. And thanks so much, Andrea. And back over to you.
Thank you, Tony. So as I said at the beginning, I am with the Lehigh University Small Business Development Center. And the Lehigh SBDC is also the home to the Lehigh Export Network. We are one of 10 regional export networks in Pennsylvania, and that's a partnership with the Pennsylvania Office of International Business Development. Through this partnership, we can assist small businesses and actually all size businesses with in-country assistance through a network of 13 representatives that cover 44 countries. As Tony mentioned, we work very closely together. So if we are not able to provide an assistance in a specific country or we need their expertise, we're more than happy to bring them in. We also help manage the Global Access Program grant. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, please feel free to reach out to me. With that, I will introduce our speaker today. Deanna Clark is the founder of the Clark-Esposito Law Firm, PC, with nearly 18 years of legal experience in the areas of U.S. Customs law and imports, OFAC and BIS in relation to exports and logistics matters, and FDA, TTB, and DEA law in relation to vapor, tobacco, and hemp products compliance. She's also the author of the book A Practical Guide to Fashion Law and Compliance, and the former president of the Organization of Women in International Trade, New York, and an advisory board member to the Urban Academy School for Global Commerce in Harlem, New York City. Prior to starting her own law firm, Deanna headed up the Global Trade Compliance Regulatory Division of a New York City-based 3PL and worked at a well-respected international trade law firm. Deanna and her team help clients streamline their global business operations. They represent clients, both foreign and domestic, on matters from implementing operational solutions to the resolution of imminent problems. In her free time, Deanna enjoys bird watching, taking walks, and spending time at the beach. And with that, Deanna, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thanks very much, Andrea and Tony, for the warm welcome and for inviting me to speak. And to everybody joining us, hello to you and thank you for joining me as well. Got a lot of information to cover today in this presentation, and we'll be talking about the top 3 overlooked activities on export violations. Let me see here. Need to figure out how to go to the next slide. There we go. All right, so what you're going to discover in this presentation is the following. In the next 45 minutes, we'll be talking about what these top 3 activities actually are. We're going to talk about how to safeguard against committing these overlooked activities and the penalties that you and your business could be facing when a violation is found. Now, today's presentation is for you if you're unsure on how to comply with our export laws, if you're worried about what you're supposed to do, and if you're sick and tired of being stressed, because there's a lot to know about and it's hard to know what am I supposed to know about. Also, we want to give you a simple plan to tackle this. So imagine you could wave a magic wand and you could be clear on your legal requirements, what paperwork you need, you can have peace of mind, and you could sleep at night without worrying about your business. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, we had a client come to me and wish me the same thing, saying, I hope you sleep well. Thank you so much for everything you do. I hope you sleep well knowing that you protect so many other individuals and grow good relationships along the way. Very excited to be working with you. This was from T. Cates. And what I want you to understand is that your company and yourself can be pulled into things without you, trying to do something purposely wrong, without you doing things the right way. And it turns out somebody else did something and you get pulled in because you happen to have been a party to a transaction. It's important to understand there are safeguards that you can implement so that even if you do get pulled in, you have a way to say, hey, I was doing everything correctly. But before we get into that, just to share a little bit about who I am. So as Andrea mentioned, I'm the founder and managing attorney of the Clark-Esposito Law Firm. We're based here in Midtown Manhattan, just up the street from Rockefeller Center. For a good part of the 2010s, I have been as a professor teaching international business law at the Fashion Institute of Technology, also in New York City, LIM College, and at Baruch. Teaching international business transactions. So, I really enjoyed teaching this subject and helping our clients understand, what this complex material even is. And I'll tell you, why I'm so passionate about what I do. From a young age, just me and my older brother, we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when we were kids. And my grandparents came from China. And so we always heard, other languages being spoken. I don't speak, Cantonese, unfortunately, a few things. But, it was normal to be immersed in another culture. And he had this wonderful globe at his house. I always enjoyed playing with the globe and looking at the different countries. And now as an adult, I've seen a good part of the world, actually. On a professional level, I've seen the devastating impact that an accidental rogue transaction can have on a business and its owners. And I've seen how protective measures help when a company unknowingly gets pulled into what I'll call a situation. I also know how much I've changed the lives of those running the companies that we help, myself and my law firm. And I love helping companies stay in business by avoiding intrusive government actions, which can put them out of business. And that's a discussion, even if we have to have the discussion about the option to close the business, generally that's not one that the business owner had hoped to ever have. So in any case, this isn't about me, this is about you. And what I want you to walk away with is to be able to identify the top 3 overlooked activities so that you can avoid falling victim to them. All right, so as I mentioned, what you'll discover are these top 3 activities. And again, it's the significance of shipping without a license when you need one, the pitfalls of not knowing your product's end use, and the danger of not knowing the end user of your exported merchandise. Now, why do you even care about these top 3 activities? I'll tell you why. Our Bureau of Industry and Security, otherwise known as BIS, they are one of the watchdogs that oversee export transactions. Next week, I'll be back to talk about the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC. They're another agency overseeing exports and export risk. But in terms of BIS, here's what you're up against when a violation is found. They have both civil and criminal penalties, civil penalties being $12,000 fine for each non-compliant transaction, meaning if you engaged in 1, 2, 3, dating back a few years, it turns out you discover 30 or so, it's for each of those transactions. $120,000 fine for each non-compliant transaction that involves any item that is subject to national security controls. And I'll tell you, sometimes the things you might think, that are obvious, like guns, there's plenty of things that are not so obvious also that can be subject to national security control. So you want to be aware of that. In terms of criminal penalties for companies that are $1 million, the fine is up to $1 million or 5 times the value of each non-compliant transaction. For individuals, it's a $250,000 fine, and you could also be facing up to 10 years in prison. And so an individual, meaning it could be an officer of a company, it could also be just if you're an individual who's been engaging, in shipping goods. So pretty, serious things to think about. And what I noticed with a lot of individuals, along with smaller companies, is that they're unaware that they're also being watched. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And, anybody who thinks that they're under the radar, I want you to know you're not as under the radar as you think you are. And it doesn't matter that you're small. You need to know that they're watching you. And they're able to watch you because of the systems. There's a system basically of checks and balances. Some are occurring here, some are occurring overseas. They also have access to US Customs officers on the ground. Then there's also general intel that is accumulated from the embassies, which are located abroad. Tony mentioned that there are resources at the embassies, and we have our commercial officers at those embassies. So, our country has a good idea of where to be looking. And so again, what we've seen, because we have seen small companies get hit, it's a matter of if, not when. So turning to the first one, we've got shipping without a license when you need one. And, many everyday goods are what are considered EAR 99. And that means that no license is needed. So generally speaking, if it's heading to a country where we have a good relationship with, meaning no embargo or nothing, preventative like we have with North Korea, you can't send anything to North Korea. Most things to Iran, which is the flag here. Most things cannot be done. Some things can be done. It seems to change with the administrations, although the Biden administration hasn't really rolled back much related to Iran that had been put in by the prior administration. But, most things, not a problem to send. Other products are subject to what are known as export controls, and this is under the EAR. Those are our export administration regulations. Those would then require a license from BIS, and these are items found on the Commerce Control List. Now, an article that may not, necessarily seem weird or even be on the CCL, depending on where it's going to, it may trigger the need for a license. So you want to keep that in mind. In addition to this, OFAC also has licenses that it requires for things heading to countries we may not have strong relationships with, which, and then depending on where they're destined, as I've been saying, this last point here, it can become an issue. Even with Cuba, under the Obama administration, he had really rolled back some of the rules, and people took full advantage to go and travel there. Today, if you want to travel there, there needs to be a specific purpose. So we'll hear about students going. Well, that's because they fall under this research or education exemption. So there are exemptions And there are general licenses, which I'm referring to these exemptions really falling into those. There's also specific licenses, which you can then apply for. And you want to get a license, in the event that, that you'd like to ship something over. All right. Now, imagine the cost of doing this wrong. Several things come to mind. So, you have an inability to complete the shipment of all portions of merchandise sold. That could lead to returned goods, lost revenue, you lose your freight, etc. A government investigation, of course, that's going to be a huge drain on internal resources, not to mention attorney's fees, in addition to penalties and fines. So, you know what your business numbers look like. The point is you have more to lose by not being compliant. So I want to give you some steps for making this work. A few things that you can do. You can conduct research to determine if these products require a license or if one is required due to its destination. So a few resources here: bis.doc.gov, also export.gov, and OFAC.gov. If you're uncertain as to how the product would be classified in general, there is a way to make what's called a commodity classification request to the agency. And in doing so, you describe your product, or you describe the destination, you describe the scenario, the transaction. And then they, will come back with an answer for you on what it is. And with that determination, you're able to see, okay, are there any issues? Do I need a license? Sometimes you need a license if it's heading to a particular place. So you can get that sorted out. And that's my note here: country-specific licenses may be required. And of course, anytime you obtain a license, you want to go ahead and hang on to that license. Sometimes you get a license for one transaction. Sometimes you can get would it be like a continuous license to engage in a set of transactions within a certain time period. So anytime it's either of those scenarios, you want to go ahead and hang on to your licenses. Okay, and that would be in line with the BIS record keeping requirements. Okay, the second thing you want to be aware of is the danger of not knowing your product's end use. And you want to ask yourself, can my product be used or applied in several ways? Is there a chance that this could be what's known as a dual use product? A dual use product can be something that has both a civilian application and a military application, like this life vest, this life jacket here. There may be articles that you're selling that you would not expect to be suspect articles, like life jackets or uniforms or night vision goggles for hunting. Because, if we're shipping goggles for hunting in Canada, the government views that differently than shipping these over to a country that may be close to a country with an armed conflict occurring. Some of you anyway may recall some of the footage going to get, Saddam or bin Laden, and there was imagery of, footage of things seen through night vision goggles. So can have both a military and a civilian use. So when you have instances like this, you want to be careful. And again, you can imagine the cost of doing this wrong. It can be viewed from the government's eyes as you attempting to circumvent the laws to support a foreign military or an unofficial war. It could be going to purported terrorist activities. It could also leave yourself open to government investigations and potentially with multiple agencies. I mentioned OFAC before, and I'll tell you, if you've got an issue with OFAC, you also have an issue with BIS in all likelihood, along with Census, who's the other agency that is recording all export data. So of course, this leads to headaches and penalties, and lots of them. We've had actually more than one query come to us related to the shipping of armor to Ukraine. And obviously right now, or maybe it's not obvious, but there have been several several sanctions issued related to Russia. And in 2014, we also had the Russian annexation, as it was called, of the Crimea region. And, to give you an example of one agency gets involved with another agency, that wasn't even, involving the company, that at least not that they were aware of. We had a client who is engaged in shipping, and they had a shipment that arrived in a European country, Western Europe. It went then into a foreign freight forwarder's hand. That freight forwarder turned out to be Russian owned. And so that package was ultimately delivered into a part of Ukraine, which was not permitted under our US sanctions. And the company, doing their own internal audit, which is something all of you can do across your shipments, they uncovered dozens actually of these shipments had happened that way. And this company had the software to do the vetting to ensure that this good is shipping to this postal code. There should be no issue here. And yet, it nonetheless ended up there. So what ended up happening is not only, first off, it was caught internally. So we were able to go to the government and make a disclosure independently of an investigation. The benefit of that has to do with the penalties and that they're not nearly as severe. But of course, because of the nature of it going where it shouldn't have gone, a destination, we then, of course, not only BIS, but also OFAC, and then the reporting to census was incorrect as well, because the census data must be correct, and the census data indicated it was going one place when it was really going to another place. So, that had to be corrected as well. And while we were able to get them to avoid actually having any penalties, there was still all that time of getting their whole team together. And I know some of you watching, probably just one of you or two of you, but they got a team of 12 together, overtime, late nights, weekends, to make sure that they caught all of the transactions dating back 5 years, because the government can come and look for things going back that far and penalize you for transactions going back that far, to make sure that they caught everything so that they could disclose everything. But again, coming forward makes a difference in terms of how they treat you with penalties, how they treat you as a company in general, because it could be the case that you end up having something occur again. And understand they had a trade compliance team. So for them, they certainly did not expect to have, their product land in a restricted location. And they spend a lot of money, for that matter, on that software that vets, okay, can it go here? Can it go there? But, even they ended up having this happen to them, and it can happen to you as well. So the idea is get prepared, get things in order so that you can be prepared to respond to the government, whether voluntarily or in the event that they do come to you for an investigation. Of course, if you're aware of something that's gone wrong, you want to go ahead and find some help. So some steps for you to make this work, right now, which you can do with your company, is you can research potential suspect merchandise types to see if anything you sell may fall into this category, some or all, if they're dual use. And just an aside, the story I just shared, that was not a dual use issue. That was actually just a clothing issue. But again, when we're looking at your products, something as innocent looking as a life jacket, could there be another use? Or uniforms? Uniforms for whom? You want to just be sure that you understand who's doing what. You also want to determine countries that could be a problem in general due to geographical proximity to countries of interest to the US, maybe those that we have a rocky relationship with, but not those which are embargoed. Although I'll tell you, there have been issues certainly on the import side related to some regions close to North Korea and manufacturing and issues related to slave labor. So, who's close to where? Because obviously our government is concerned about issues of transshipment or goods otherwise getting into a territory where that activity would otherwise be restricted. Another step for you would be to create a rating system for your export team. And again, I know that may just be one or two of you, but look at your products, identify what you're selling and where you're selling it to. Maybe you instruct your team that, okay, for these top countries, Iran, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, etc. You're like, okay, anything that is going to or is near these, flag it. And by flagging it, it just means let's do a little extra due diligence. Let's make sure we understand, who's doing what, who we're involved with, how do they plan to use this, where is this really going? Okay, do we need a license, right? And so work your way around that way. And again, if you need to go back and make a commodity classification request, you can always do that as well. Okay, which brings me to the third point. And understood there's 7 actually, but we only have time to do 3. So this is not knowing your end user, all right? So look, I know from listening to clients, I know the temptation of making a sale and shipping things out. We've got a client in Silicon Valley, and each of their products is minimum 200 some odd thousand. Most orders are in the millions. And it's like, yeah, let's just roll these out. Unfortunately, a lot of the places who want to buy the thing that they're selling are, I'll give you an example. They're, a university in China, or they're another, research company and in China. Well, the problem, with that is that a lot of research and or universities, et cetera, in China, many things are both publicly and privately owned, which means the Chinese government is involved. And there are different people, in addition to destinations, there are certain people and or companies that we simply can't send things to. We also have several lists. BIS has several lists. For example, they have their unverified list. Well, if a place that this, for example, the Silicon Valley client, in fact, we dealt with this, somebody on the ownership of the company that was going to purchase this unit from them, they were a company on the unverified list. And so because of that, you then have to ask the question, okay, well, can we still sell this to them even if they're on the list? How do we figure this out? Now, importantly, the government actually gives you, credit, if you will, for doing your due diligence. So just by you taking the steps, having a process, a written process, document your process for, okay, here's how we check for this would be a red flag. Here's what we do before we approve a sale. And I know you want to make the sale, but you need to conduct your due diligence, to understand who will ultimately get the goods and how it will be used. We have a different Silicon Valley client, their product ordinarily, how it's used, not an issue. It could also, however, be used has some, configuration to do, but in a different way, it could also be used in a military application. And so anytime, again, we're dealing with this issue, we need to know its end user, its end use. Is it really being used for research, like you say? Well, what kind of research? And then where will it end up? Where a product is then sent off to another place, that could be, if it's another country, that could be considered a re-export. If it's going to another place, for example, in China, that could possibly be an issue also, depending on who it's going to. So it's important to understand who it is that is on the other side of the transaction, how it'll be used, and where it may go on to. Okay. Now, last point here says government does not view merchandise as being equally low risk in all countries. So again, something that may be shipped to Canada might be considered low risk. Something that is heading to Oman, which is, not Oman, you know what, I'm sorry, I forget the name, but heading to another part of the world that's in closer proximity to, where there are conflicts, both politically with the United States and or armed conflict, that could be more of an issue. All right, so if you were to imagine the cost of doing this wrong, talk about government pre-investigations, okay? What ends up happening is they start poking around to the parties you're working with. So you've got your foreign freight forwarder, you've got who you use in this part of the world, that part of the world. Well, they start asking questions to them about you. And that can start to damage your reputation. They're not going to want to keep working with you. We've seen this happen. We've seen relationships deteriorate because the government's asking around and nobody wants to be involved with the government, asking questions, et cetera. Shipments also may not arrive to your customers. You're going to lose them as customers. They'll buy from another part of the world or some other supplier who did do things the right way. And once the investigation starts, that's a huge drain on your internal resources. And then, of course, you have the attorney's fees. And this is what I was saying earlier about the company we represent who was engaged in this shipping, the shipping that went to this portion of Ukraine where it wasn't permitted to go. Even though they didn't intend to do anything wrong, even though they took the steps to vet, they still came forward and said, let's clear this up just so we don't have to face anything later on. And it was a huge drain on internal resources. Okay. So you help yourself by having your own internal audits, preparing things in advance so that in the event an investigation does start, you're in a great position to just say, here's this transaction, here's the documents, here's everything. What more do you want? And I'll tell you what else they want. They also want you to have a written export compliance manual. And they want that manual so that they can see that you understand what the law is, that you're abiding by the law, that you've got your internal processes for abiding by the law, and that you periodically come and check and make sure that you are following A, what you set out to follow, and B, that you're coming back and saying, okay, is this still current? So you're periodically going and making sure, checking with the law to make sure that you're still following the right rules. All right. Now, let me give you some steps for making this work. So you can start by doing some research on restricted and prohibited parties. Okay, there's several government lists, but a good place to start is with BIS has what's known as its list of parties of concern. And if you put that into Google, what's in green here, you'll pull it up immediately. You also want to create an internal list of customer types that could raise a red flag. And so, this could be universities or research labs, or I don't know, again, what your businesses are. So for each of you, you'll have your own list. If you take yourself and then sort of draw lines and who could be, potentially a red flag, or where in the world could there be an issue, start that brainstorming, because this is going to help you start to put together your program to the extent you don't have one. To the extent you do have one, you want to come and do these exercises periodically just to keep fine-tuning your processes. Okay. And a last one is to go ahead and implement a procedure for the vetting of customers and its end use. This should read end use pre-shipments. And what we mean by that is that, again, you're resisting the temptation to make the sale. You got to do your due diligence. And what you have is you have something, your own internal process where you're like, okay, is this customer fill in the blank? Is this customer, you create your own list of things. Are they aware of any issues with the government? Have there been any government investigations? And these are things you want to ask your customer, find out more about them. Who else have they bought from in the past? How long have they been in business for? You really want to know your customer. And so you come up with your own procedure for vetting your customers to understand these, not only end use, you're really looking at end use, end user, and destination related issues, and do this in advance of shipping anything. All right, so for your action plan to move forward, because I know some of you are like, I'll never get caught. You want to admit that your business is wide open for penalties because you're engaged in risky behavior, even if unknowingly. Okay. And part of the goal is for you to have a clue. So you get to know if there could be risks involved and what level of risk, really, what level of risk. You want to acknowledge that your business is worth keeping and that even you could be caught, because you can't. And you want to commit to starting an export compliance program within the next 3 days. And that gives you till the end of the week. It's no better time than the present. And right now, and yes, the presentation will be sent out afterwards. Just even taking what you have here, you can begin to work on, okay, we want to work on this. Let's take a look at how we're going to start asking questions of our potential customers. Let's start identifying where in the world there might be an issue. Let's start looking at our inventory to see where there may be a dual use in a particular circumstance. And understand, you may only be dealing in one type of commodity right now, but your plans for the future may include other things. And what do those things look like? Are they accessories to the main thing that you're selling now? Is it just a whole other, line of product that you want to sell? Whatever it may be, when you give those new lines some thought or these spin-offs, you may conclude, you know what? No, that's actually not a good idea because of such and such risk. Or you may conclude, okay, great, this has no risk. We should be able to roll this out, at least in the following parts of the world. Because even that can guide where are you targeting your marketing. Oh, we sell to the whole world, that's great. But really, where's your customer? You're not going to market to the entire world. And you'll find that you have a competitive advantage in certain parts of the world. So, okay, let's hone in here. We know that we don't see any issues. We've got different issues with people in some of our Latin American countries, or the leadership, of Nicaragua, for example. There's issues with leadership, there's issues with financial institutions, there's issues with companies. And at the end of the day, maybe not everybody should be on those lists, and there's ways to get them off of those lists, by the way. But if they're on the list, as far as the government's concerned, it's your problem, not that other person's problem who may be in another country and simply unreachable. All right, so far you've discovered what the top 3 activities are, how to safeguard against committing these overlooked activities, the penalties you and your business could be facing when a violation is found. And, from all of this, I hope, because I've given you steps across these 3 different things, what I hope you'll get, just this one thing, is that you can reduce your risk of exposure to these violations in a few simple steps. Okay. Now, you're probably asking, okay, well, how do I make that happen? And so what we did, knowing that we were going to have exporters here in need of help, is we went ahead and created a BIS boot camp. This is going to take place on June 7th. So it'll be 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern. It will be 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific. And I'll tell you, this is not a boot camp for companies who do not plan to keep their business open beyond the next 5 years. It's not for business owners in denial that their business getting caught for wrongdoing is a matter of when, not if. And it's also not for business owners who are openly violating the law and don't care about the risk to themselves or the destruction of their families. Some time ago, I learned of a company and what they were doing. Actually, I don't even know if it was a company or an individual, I don't remember, but they were personally transporting something that they knew, that they were well aware was not allowed to simply be driven over the border, okay, because it was a weapon. And they were selling these products. First of all, if you have weapons, that also brings in ITAR and the US munitions list. It brings in all these other government-related things that you need to qualify for. Business owners like that who are reckless, they don't care what their wife thinks of them. They don't care if their kids are going to think that they're total morons. This boot camp is not for them. Okay. And I'll tell you, how this works. So the boot camp is where you'll join me for a deep dive into the requirements and what you need to do. So we'll show you the other top 4 most overlooked activities that land you in trouble and how you can avoid them. We'll also give you a simple structure for your own export compliance program. We'll detail how you can prepare your business to qualify for a penalty reduction. And I'll also answer any questions you have about your unique situation. Now, at the end of our time together, you'll know what types of questions to ask your customers to assess the risk associated with the sale. So your end user, destination. You'll have a framework of the key components to an export compliance program. And you'll also learn how you can prepare your business to qualify for a reduction or cancellation of penalties. So if you're interested in participating in this, you can head over to https. We've got this bit.ly here, BIS Bootcamp 2022. You'll complete the registration form on that page. You'll receive an email confirming your registration, so thank you page. And then you'll look for a second email with event details next Friday. Okay. Now, the total value of this is $2,295. And we are offering this to you if you book your boot camp ticket for $995. Now, what's the catch? The catch is that we only have 23 spots available. Okay, so if you're interested, you can head over to this bit.ly, this website here, and you can sign up for your export boot camp. Okay. Now, remember, as a bonus, for anybody interested who signs up, we have a bonus gift for you. We're going to give you a template of our pre-vetting export control questionnaire. We're also going to show you how to use and implement it into your business right away. Okay, so this question of how do we find out, et cetera, we help you figure out those questions because we're giving you a template for you to use immediately. Okay, here's the address. Here's what the page will look like, when you land here, for anyone interested in signing up. And, I want you to remember, you're going to learn how to recognize and prevent the other top 4. So we're going to round out the 7 overlooked, top overlooked mistakes. And we're going to give you a step-by-step blueprint of how to create a BIS export compliance program. Okay, you'll get your template for easy vetting of your potential customers to help you uncover any red flags pre-shipment. And again, you can register here. Now, I want you to know, I have not been able to see any of the questions or comments in the chat. So Andrea, if you could help me go through those, please. I'd be happy to take those and any other questions at this time.
So we do have a couple. The first question is, are services in general also subject to obtaining a license, or are there specific services that would require a license?
Sure. So, services, of course, raise a different issue. And typically services don't require a license, except that there may be a case where you're not actually allowed to engage in any kind of transaction with that individual or persons in that country, which means you can't get paid. And I'll give you an example. We're a law firm. We provide services. Under the Obama administration, we had an Iranian company whose executives were able to obtain a visa from the US State Department for the sending of an Iranian executive to conduct business in the United States. Perfectly legal. Then a new administration came in. That administration rolled back what had been permissible under the Obama administration. And now we were faced with an issue of, if we continue to provide legal services to this company, we are no longer able to actually get paid for those services. Okay, that was the conundrum. Turns out there is an exception. So there is a special license that can be obtained for getting legal fees of US companies representing Iranian companies. So I share all that to say there can be an issue related to services. They may also be, a way to get past what is the what seems to be an issue may not actually be an issue. We have to appreciate even the laws related to what we can and can't do with specific individuals and countries. Those laws change oftentimes by presidential executive order, which means what is permissible today can change tomorrow. So you want to keep that in mind.
Thank you. The other question says, are the links provided in the presentation to find out if export country of interest requires a license hot links?
I'm sorry, Ted, could you repeat that?
Are the links provided in the presentation to find out if export country of interest requires a license hot links? I think the question means, are they clickable?
No, they're not they won't, I don't think anyway, maybe they will be hyperlinked in the PDF. But I don't think that they would be hyperlinked. And I can tell you that to register for the boot camp, that is also not hyperlinked. So I would take a photo of this slide here, and this way you can be sure to type it in correctly.
Thank you. The other question says, does an in-country transfer require a new license?
Mm-hmm. So the answer to that is it depends. Who is it heading to in country? And so is that other who somehow restricted or prohibited, or some owner of it restricted or prohibited, meaning on a list? Is its use going to change? The devil is in the details. And so the answer is, the answer is actually just, it depends. But these are the things that, that you'd want to look at. And, how long is it going for? Is it going for good? Was there a sale involved? If not, why not? There's different things to look at.
Thank you. I think this question is actually for me. Can the SBDC counselor assist with brainstorming the vetting of a foreign buyer? The answer to that will really depends on each state. In Pennsylvania, I can only speak for Pennsylvania. We wouldn't be able to do that just because of the legal liability that would come with that. We don't have that expertise in-house. The other question says, and I think this one's for Tony, will the country guides from the U.S. Commercial Services be an additional resource to vetting foreign countries and or buyers?
The country commercial guides, they have a lot of information. Like what are the top industry prospects for U.S. companies, things like that, and also how to do business. But they'll have some best practices. But for vetting, we do have a separate service, the International Company Profile, to do the due diligence check. Sometimes if you just want to do like a precursor review, we can pass the name to the folks at the embassy, and they can just see if they have a relationship with them, if they have any glaring information on the reputation in the market. But for a deeper dive, we'll have to look at that due diligence check.
Thank you, Tony. This one is for you, Deanna. I am a startup looking to export ag-related services as an indirect exporter. I'm going through putting together my export plan with the assistance of my SBDC counselor. Would the boot camp be helpful to me?
Yeah, the boot camp would definitely be helpful to you. Here's why. So with you starting up your export period, your export business period, you have the advantage coming in and setting up your export compliance program, because you'll be able to see, oh, okay, we should be paying attention to this. We need to pay attention to that. You'll also see we don't need to pay attention to this or that. There's several things that don't need to be paid attention to. So you'll be able to eliminate the things you don't need to pay attention to and focus in on the things that you do need to be paying attention to. If you do, you also probably have no idea what you're supposed to be paying attention to. And this program is designed for growing companies. You can be your size, you could be a larger company who's been growing. Typically what we find is, companies interested, and this is why I went through the list of who this is not for. Companies who have built the business up enough, who say, you know what, we're making real money. My family's happy. I'm taking more vacations. This is really happening. I have people who rely on me. The salaries we pay, this is, supporting other families, other lives, other hopes, other dreams. They are the ones who want to make the investment because now they have something to lose. It's less frequent that a business owner like yourself would come in at the beginning because they don't know any better. You have already demonstrated that you're proactive in protecting, it's not just your business, it's your life. You're interested in protecting yourself, which is why you have already been working with your SBDC counselor so that you can implement your business in the right way, build a strong foundation from which you can leap off and grow tremendously from there. So yes, this would absolutely help you. Yeah.
Thank you. We have one more. It says, we have a summary product catalog with top line info on multiple controlled ECCN 9A515X items. Typically, we'd need a license to send technical info for controlled items to certain countries. Since top line info only, do we need to apply for separate license for each controlled product mentioned in the catalog, or can just one license application cover sending the whole catalog?
Can you say the part from the word since, please?
Since top line info only, do we need to apply for separate license for each controlled product mentioned in the catalog, or can just one license application cover sending the whole catalog?
So you want to do each of the products, but in your request, you can submit more than one product, okay? So, and the top line, I don't know, just because different companies use that in a different way, so I don't want to presume I know how you mean it. But, you know, you're talking ECCNs. ECCNs, certainly with the things we have for our clients, they can be very complex units. Not everything has to be as complicated, but I would guess, you know, that everything in your catalog is not equally complex or equally not that complicated. And so because of that, you know, then it's, well, maybe this one has some different application or use. Again, I don't know what you mean by top line. But importantly, you know, when you're making the license request, you can do more than one thing. So I would take a look at your catalog. I would see how you can group it. Okay, I get your catalog's probably organized, okay, for this, for that, for that. But can it be further grouped? Maybe grouped based on certain specifications. You know, maybe group, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't seen your product list. But the idea would be, let's group these a certain way. We can make the license request on these this way. And can we get it for, you know, more than one transaction, however you're doing it? Well, I guess that's the thing. The devil's in the details. So for this transaction or for this, you know, yeah, to this particular seller. I mean, I've seen different permutations. So, but the goal is, if you're not going to do the whole catalog, how can we make it so it's okay? Look, we've put in, you know, 10 license applications, and here's how we organize them. This way you can go back to management and explain to them why you did it this way. It also helps for anytime you're conducting your own internal audit. Okay, here's what we have here. You know, if you just have your Excel spreadsheet, all right, these need to be renewed on this date, this date, this date, this date. You want to make it so that whoever comes after you to take your, you know, role when you get promoted, you want to be sure that they're able to follow what you've done, especially if they're working under you. Then you have less to explain because you've documented and come up with a real system that works. It also will help if you discontinue items, or if you decide maybe you have a new version of an item. It helps you to say, okay, you know what, this one we're done with, this one we're keeping. So instead of just taking it in order of the catalog, I would organize them in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have any more questions right now. Let's see. Yeah, it seems like that's all. I wanted to thank Tony for making the introduction to Deanna and making today's training possible. And I also wanted to take a minute to invite everyone to our training next week. So next Tuesday, we will have Deanna again talking to us about the top 3 OFAC mistakes even experienced exporters make. The link to register for that event, if you haven't done so yet, will be on the follow-up email to today's presentation. And as I said, you will also get a link to the recording of today's training and to the slides. We don't have any more questions. So Deanna, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. I can say that you really made this presentation easy to understand for those of us who are not as experienced as you are in the topic. We're getting really good feedback, and I'm hoping we'll get a very good turnout next week. Thank you everyone for your time, and just keep an eye out today or tomorrow for the follow-up email.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye, everyone.